Hello guys, and welcome back to I Never Knew That. So last week the topic we drew was the space race. What I didn't know at the time is that there have been many different space races, and some are still currently happening. So first off, before we get into the actual video, let's talk about some of the different space races that have taken place. So there's a space race that began in 1955 between the Soviet Union and the United States, and this was mostly to see who could achieve the most firsts in space, such as the first launch, the first man to be put in orbit, the first landing on the moon, and all of that stuff. And some say it's still currently happening. Within this, there was also a shorter race called the moon race, and this was simply to see who would be the first to land on the moon. This one was won by the United States when the Apollo 11 mission landed on the moon successfully. Currently, there is a Mars race to see who will be the first to put humans on Mars. This race is not ended yet, and it is currently happening. There is also an Asian space race, and this is mostly a political race between different countries in Asia, especially China, Japan, and India, for supremacy of spaceflight. And lastly, there's the billionaire space race, and this is part of the new space, or the private space flight, where multiple billionaires are working on their private space companies. This is to see who has the best space company, and this one is currently happening. Other than space races, there have also been 3 prized competitions, with the first one being the Ansari X Prize, and its goal was to launch a manned space vehicle twice within 2 weeks with a prize of $10 million. This is won by Spaceship One of Mojave Aerospace Enterprises in 2004. The other 2 competitions was the Google Lunar X Prize and the America's Space Prize, neither of which were won. So the main topic for today's video is the space race that took place between the Soviet Union and the United States during the Cold War, starting around 1955. So in 1955, both countries began building ballistic missiles that could put objects into orbit. You could launch that far, and this really began the space race between the 2 countries. Both countries announced that they would have an artificial satellite in orbit by 1958. And in October 4th of 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, which was the first artificial satellite. After the Soviet Union got such a large head start in doing this, this made the United States focus much more on their space program. And in December 6th of 1957, the United States launched Project Vanguard, the first artificial satellite built by the United States. A few seconds after launch, the rocket blew up, and it became an international joke and a massive embarrassment to the United States, with their first rocket being a large failure. Then, in January 31st of 1958, the United States launched Explorer 1. This was the first successful United States satellite. It was much smaller than Sputnik though, and it only weighed 30 pounds, where Sputnik weighed 182. After this achievement, President Eisenhower requested that a civilian space agency be founded for non-military space projects, because up until this point, all the space projects had been headed by the United States military. This is what led to the founding of NASA, and all the funding that was sent to the military for space projects then began getting sent to NASA, and NASA took over the entire United States space program. On April 12th of 1961, Russia again made a very large achievement by launching the first human into orbit. They launched Yuri Gagarin in the Vostok 1 spacecraft. He made one orbit around the globe before returning to Earth. Then, on May 5th of 1961, just about a month later, the first American, Alan Shepard, launched into space. He flew the spacecraft Freedom 7, and while he did not orbit around the Earth, his mission was actually a little more important than Yuri Gagarin's, because he had actual control of the flight, where Yuri Gagarin was just sitting in there riding along. With this success behind them, and also wanting to get ahead of Russia, President John Kennedy made a statement that the United States was going to start looking to land on the moon. This began the Apollo program, and many years were spent working on the Apollo 11, which would put Americans on the moon. Finally, on July 16th of 1969, the Apollo 11 took off from Florida. After a 3-day trip and orbiting around the moon for a day, humans landed on the moon for the first time in July 20th. After landing, the astronauts spent 6 hours checking the craft and making sure that it was okay after the impact on the surface of the moon. And Neil Armstrong stepped out of the spacecraft Approximately 1/5 of the entire global population watched him take that step, which was about 723 million people. The astronauts returned to Earth and landed safely in the Pacific Ocean on July 24th, 2,982 days after President John Kennedy decided to land on the moon. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed this video about the moon landing and the space race. You know it is time to draw a topic for next week, so see what our next topic will be. It is Formula One. Alright guys, I am very excited to study about Formula One, and I'll make a video about that next week, and I'll see you guys then. Bye.